So our next speaker is Samantha Mataloni-Cook. Really excited to have her. As I said before, I mean, one of the things, the Facebook community for me is just tremendous. I mean, there's tremendous value that's given, but I also pay attention to the conversations that happen. Again, our goal every year is to sell out the event and then find speakers to speak to our audience. And one of the most passionate threads we have by far in our community comes around to parenting and the conversation between homeschooling, people taking their kids out of school, Montessori school, teaching kids entrepreneurship, and Saad, where's Saad? So maybe he'll open up, you know what, can we pass Saad a microphone? I was not planning this. Tell him what you're doing currently with your kids. You have 3 kids, and give them a little bit of context, and we'll get right into the talk. If we have no microphone, you can whisper into my ear and everybody will hear it.
Coming.
Yeah, Saad.
All right, so what I'm doing with my kids, hopefully not screwing them up. So
Philip would say don't put that pressure on yourself, but anyways, go ahead.
we decided to homeschool them about a year ago. I got the idea actually from MastermindTalks, from a lot of the attendees here. Oh. So it's turned into, I guess, world schooling, and I've actually changed the way that I operate my business. So instead of me traveling solo back and forth to Toronto, I travel a little bit slower and longer, and they essentially come with us everywhere. So they're here, so they're 6, 5, and 2.
Ladies and gentlemen, come on.
Yeah. So they're in the pool somewhere right now, yeah. Right? And my 6-year-old is probably doing his math on the little pool chair before he jumps in. So that's what we're doing. We're kind of traveling around the world, exposing them to charitable components as well as different entrepreneurial learnings as well.
And he posted a picture, I don't know if I have it, I don't have it here, but of the kids in Dubai, and they were giving food to like workers, some of the workers down there.
Yeah, I mean, we found a lot of labor camps that a lot of the fancy buildings in Dubai are built out of. So my son actually observed a few of the workers just looking at food from outside a grocery store that they couldn't afford to buy. Yeah. So he actually asked if we can go in and buy a bunch of food. We created packages, then we went into the labor camps and delivered it.
And how long have you been doing this now?
It'll be a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and the conversation we had yesterday is actually, he's at the point where they may be selling their home and just completely just traveling the world and doing
just
this.
Living a year at a time in different places.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. The funny thing about listening to Salim yesterday was he said that Singularity University can't get accredited as a university because they have to keep a strict curriculum. They can't change their curriculum, which is funny. Which just goes to show, I mean, how education, we have a long way to go. And Jim Quick talked about it as well. But Saad actually shared this article in our Facebook group about the techies who are hacking education. And when I saw this, the article was about Samantha and her lovely husband, which they're both at the back of the room. And this article was shared over 100,000 times and basically covered that Samantha has just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to education. That's her background. She homeschools her 3 children, I believe 2 now, but she'll probably get into that into her talk. So, ladies and gentlemen, Samantha Cook.
Hi, everybody. Okay. I hear you're interested in education. Oh, same slide. So a little bit about me. I have a master's in education, and I specialize in museum education, but I've worked with nonprofits and different groups. I'm working with companies now. There it is, A Hacker's Guide to Learning. These photos were taken by a Wired photographer, by the way, and they're beautiful, so they are not from my iPhone. I think it's important to start off with the story of how I got into education. I actually got my first degree in medieval archaeology. And my mom pleaded with me, please just minor in business. And I said, no. And so she, to her credit, waved to me from the airport, and off I went. And I was working on a site in Scotland, and I got to consult on a gallery that was opening of artifacts that were coming out of the ground. And that was my favorite part. And I realized how much I enjoyed connecting the public with what was happening. And I had been teaching since I was 15, was my first tutoring job. So I knew that's the direction I wanted to go. The second stage came when I was working at the Smithsonian, and I was doing a lot of outreach programming, and I was having babies, because I'm crafty like that. And there was this moment where I'd be going into all of these schools, and I'm like, but I study child development, and I know how children learn, and nobody is doing anything about it. Like, these kids, they're bored. And that is when I decided that I would quit and start working freelance, and I was going to stay home with my kids. And that is the moment that I actually decided to homeschool. So where does this system come from? I know that's a lot of words, I'm sorry, but all of these quotes are really essential to me. Our system actually comes from Prussia, and I think it's important to understand that our system is based on a system of obedience and compliance. Prussia, King Frederick was famous for saying if the soldiers knew what they were fighting for, they wouldn't fight, right? So they had to create the system of workers. Now, there was a three-tier system. The top 0.5% were educated. The next 5% were educated just enough to be managers, and the last 94% were taught enough to do the job and become factory workers and militia. I don't think this is that different from the system we have now. And I think it's important to understand that when Horace Mann brought it over to the US, that he billed it as the great equalizer, when in fact it did just the opposite. So where are we now? We are at a place where No Child Left Behind is still in action. Race to the Stars is really just a tag-along. We are in a system where the testing monopolies actually make more money than the NFL. Is anybody surprised by that? It's incredible. This is why change can't happen. People always ask me, well, there's lots of people trying to change the system. Well, yes, that's true. But when you have that kind of money behind testing and standardization, and generally, you know, the system doesn't allow anything but obedience and compliance. This is where we're at. That top quote was taken from an article in Palo Alto, which is the heart of Silicon Valley. People, innovative, creative, lots of things coming out of Silicon Valley, and yet they have had a slew of adolescent suicides. And this was a response by one of the teenagers to those suicides and how much pressure they're under. And when she says we are sick, that it's very much true. So what can we do about it? Well, we can rewrite craft education. Now, I could go into all kinds of alternative schooling, Montessori, Waldorf, democratic schooling, but Jason would not allow me to bribe another speaker for another 15 minutes. So I'm going to say that there are a lot of other methodologies. However, the thing to be careful about is that oftentimes they're so focused on the ideology of that particular method that it actually doesn't work for every single child. And if an educational system can't be adapted, then it's really not a holistic approach. So I'm going to talk mostly about homeschooling because that's what I do. I have homeschooled since the beginning. None of my children have gone to school except for this year. My daughter decided she wanted to try it. And that was a big deal for me. So I found her the most constructivist, hippie, not wearing shoes, calling your teachers by their first names kind of school I could. And she's really enjoying it, but even there are compromises I've had to make. One of them is that I have to deal with now a system that doesn't move as quickly as I can. But my daughter says to me, "Don't worry, Mom, I'm going to come home in like a year. I'm just, trying this out." Okay. My other two are homeschooling, and we talk a lot about the different ways in which we can learn. And my children tend to be very up on the different ways that they can learn things. The real difference is that when children are in spaces where they are stressed, when there's only one answer, when they're made to sit, their bodies go into fight or flight. Their adrenaline starts kicking in. Then they lose auditory processing, so they can't hear anything. They also lose peripheral vision, so they're not maybe seeing everything, and that's very hard, especially if they're a visual learner. So their bodies try to compensate. Now, they're not hearing, they're not seeing, and their bodies are moving. What do you think happens? Well, it's what happened to me. I was in detention for a good portion of my elementary school years. They get in trouble. There are so many ways that we know how children learn. And that is, again, another talk. But when children have a holistic approach to learning, like we do, the way that their neurons form are very complex and connected. And when they're stressed, they form these linear lines. So they're not connecting their learning to other parts of their knowledge. So what does it look like? For us, it looks very different every year. My kids have known for a long time that they are the captains of their educational ships, and so every year we have family meetings in which we figure out, okay, what are we going to learn this year, and what is that going to look like? And then my kids actually like a lot of input from me, and so we do a lot of interesting things like, for example, when we were studying the Age of Exploration, we decided to do a modern marketing campaign. So my older son took the idea of Isaac Newton and hacked the poster of Gravity, the movie. So I had apples and Isaac Newton floating across space, and there was this tagline at the bottom, and he did a really beautiful job. Whereas my younger son decided to make a propaganda film about freeing Galileo from the church's clutches. I mean, it was profound and devastating. When we were studying Versailles, I have a friend who travels the world doing ceiling paintings and gilding, so she came over and gave us a tutorial on gold leaf gilding. It was a really hands-on. I thought, they're never going to use this again, but I really want them to experience what it's like, and now every frame in my house is gold leafed. When they chose to build their own business, my older son decided that he was going to genetically modify DNA, which was more of a hypothetical project, but we looked at what kinds of grants are available, what are we looking at in terms of funding, how would we do that, really? I took him seriously. And then my younger son just really wanted to have a taco stand, and so we figured out, how do we build a taco stand? And we held a taco day. And it was really, really awesome. I think parents fear the most that their kids won't get enough. But the world is rich. And my kids find friendships in younger kids and older kids, and they find friendships in adults. They have mentors, and all of this, plus the fact that we are a making and hacking kind of family, really inspired us to actually build a hackerspace. It started with one program we ran once a month saying, come in, we'll teach you how to solder, we'll teach you how to program. It turned into every week, and then we opened a kids hackerspace, and the kids helped us build the tables and buy the equipment, and we ran a Kickstarter. And within 2 years, I now have a hackerspace in Oakland, and I have a national program, and I'm running almost 60 programs internationally. And what's really resonating with people is the idea that they could actually trust children, that the children know what they love, and that there isn't this profound, futuristic kind of focus, that in fact their happiness right now, who they are people right now. And we've lost sight of that. The tenets that we really focus on in our house and in my nonprofit, and everything I do really is about these values: self-direction, community, techno-responsibility, sustainability, an understanding of yourself, of others, of the world, innovation, creativity. I think business is going this way. What I see happening is that business is really coming to a place where instead of competition, it's collaboration. Instead of valuing somebody who can just do things quickly, that they do them right, and that we construct our own value. And that's what I want for my children. What's interesting is that there's a lot of homeschoolers or alternative schoolers who come out of this, and they say, well, what am I going to do next? They could go to college. In fact, colleges now have separate applications just for homeschoolers that ask the questions in a much different way, and they're actually seeking them. What I love about them, though, is that almost all the teenagers I know who were homeschooled or who went to alternative schooling also know that that is not the only path, and that they could build whatever it is that they want with or without that. Another piece of this is the social aspect. People often ask me, and all I can say is we were at a party last weekend, and a woman says to me, "Oh, but wouldn't it be better for them to be socialized in school?" And before I could even answer, before I could launch into my, really? My son walks behind me and says, "Yeah, I wish I was socialized. I should leave this party and go to school," like in a really sarcastic tone. And I was like, wow, but he's right. He's right. We're not in a vacuum. We exist with the world, and we exist in a more natural world because he's able to access anybody that he wants. He's able to put himself in social situations that are comfortable to him, sometimes uncomfortable to him. He is on a judo team right now, and he's been doing really well, and that's really sort of embarrassing. He doesn't like the attention, but he has learned to be proud of himself through that. So if this is true, then what we have is a shift. So if employees, they're valued for their time, their efficiency, for doing what they're directed to do, shouldn't we be shifting to a model where we're valued for our ideas and our passion, and that when we play, that our work is our play and our passions are our play? When I make decisions with my business, my kids are there. They're a part of it. They've seen me build everything that I've done up until this point. They've been with me. Even since I worked at the Smithsonian, I put them in a sling and asked for forgiveness instead of permission. They've been with me the whole way, and they see the decisions I made and the reasons why I made the decisions I did. And sometimes they participate in it. I want them to see that life is what you make it, and that if something's not working, that anything is possible. We recently went through this where I had to make some hard decisions about what I was doing, and they were compassionate and kind, and actually much more insightful than any adult I had ever come across. I know, homework, right? So there's a huge intersect. You may not have kids, you may not want kids, you may not like kids. But it's really important that we understand how essential shifting away from this construct of obedience and compliance is. It affects all of us. These are the people we'll be hiring. These are the people who will be taking care of us when, we're not working anymore. These are the workplaces that our children are going to be coming into. And it's essential that we think about what we want in education. It's directly connected to our business culture, that we need to build the collaborative, holistic environments that we want to see them come into, and that it will reflect back. If that's what we're valuing, then the educational system will start to reflect that as well. Also, I think it's really important that we de-school ourselves. No matter what kind of school experience you had, there is going to be an element that you could take and look very deeply at yourself and say, how was I affected by this? Do I trust myself? Do I have confidence in myself? Do I look to others for answers, or do I feel like there is a right or wrong answer? How do I treat my employees or my colleagues? Do I treat them in a way that allows them to construct their own value around their work? And using childhood sort of as the model, I've started looking at my own work and saying, what is my happiness right now? What does that look like for me? This is the absolute worst time for me to do it, but I ended up taking a class because it was the only time it was offered this year on writing and illustrating children's books. And I love the idea, and I may never publish, but what that has done for me is it was an immediate gratification. It was my happiness in the moment. I'm enjoying the process with my kids. They're participating in it. And it is making my year, just in this moment, so much happier. And that's the way a child would approach his or her own education and his or her own passions. And that, to me, is the most essential thing we could do right now to alter education, to alter business models. And homeschooling has not just been a journey for them, and they're doing really well, and I don't know, if they'll ever go to school or not, and I'm fine with either, but it's also been a journey for me, and I have learned just as much from them as they have from me. I think that's it. So thank you so much. I hope that this was informative, and I hope that you'll find me later if you have any questions.